Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Are you excited today? I'm super excited about being here. And I'm Lisa Silverman. I'm the Executive Officer for the Office of Public School Construction and the State Allocation Board. And today, again, the excitement just rolls off me. And I'm excited to introduce some folks from Muroc Joint Unified School District. And together they'll be showcasing the projects they recently completed at several of their school sites, and how they leverage funding from federal and state program resources to get their projects built. Why is that important? Stick around and you'll hear about it. So the Office of Public School Construction has come to know our colleagues, Kevin Cordes and Trevor Walker, very distinguished people over there. And quite well, we built this strong relationship and enjoy hearing about their journey, about how it took, the milestones they took to achieve their project. It's great for the community, great for the students, administration, and their teaching staff. And again, what a benefit for those folks who are taking advantage of this public school on military installations program grant. And again, for all the folks at Edwards Air Force Base and Edwards, California, very significant project they completed. Although our Office of Public School Construction's role in the success of this project was very modest, but again, we're partners, but we are proud to have the opportunity to share some of their program details and requirements and the obstacles and the achievements that Muroc pulled together in this effort. With that, I'd like to introduce Kevin Cordes, who's the superintendent of Muroc Joint Unified School District, Trevor Walker, who's the assistant superintendent of business services. And they'll talk about all the things they've achieved, and they even have a flashy, beautiful video presentation for you. So again, stick around. Also, I would like to introduce from our office, the Office of Public School Construction, is Brian Lepask, who's the Chief of Program Services. And he'll walk you through some of the programs that we offer and some of the programs that were very amenable to the project, super important, and it was the facility hardship and seismic mitigation program. He's going to walk you through those two requirements and how we were able to partner with Muroc to access these program funds. And again, with that, I'll introduce Kevin Cordes and Trevor Walker.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We're really happy to be here today. Kevin and I, we kind of came up from Edwards Air Force Base. Before we get into the presentation, though, we'd really like to show that video. So hope you enjoy, and then we'll roll back in the presentation in a second. Well, hopefully you enjoyed the video. It's a lot of fun making it, jumping through a lot of hoops to actually get drones in the air on Edwards Air Force Base. Um, we learned military airspace is slightly restricted, but we really want to be able to showcase the schools. So hopefully that helps show what we've been able to do. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to kind of talk about our district.
So Merrimack Joint Unified School District is located in southeast Kern County. We're actually a joint unified, where part of our district's in San Bernardino County as well. We have 1,750 students, 3 elementary schools, 2 comprehensive high schools, junior, senior high schools. We have 1 continuation high school, 1 adult education program. We were founded in 1911, so the district's been around for quite a while. And we have 3 of our schools that are located on Edwards Air Force Base.
So all 5 of our schools have had either renovation or just an outright replacement in the last 5 years. We did 2 bond projects, or we've done 2 bond projects, and we actually are in the process of beginning more bond work. So on the Boron side of our district, then Boron Junior Senior High School and West Boron Elementary. Boron, what we did is we actually replaced the classrooms. So we did modular. It was an interesting experience. We won't hit on too much, but if you have questions on going modular, I'm happy to have a chat after the meeting. And then for West Boron, what we did is we just did basic modernization. We actually broke it up into a lot of small parts. So we did over-the-desk approvals with DSA to keep costs low. For the schools you saw in the video, this was part of the public schools and military installation grants. So the way it works is the DoD actually funded a lot of the projects, and then we had local match. And for those at Desert, it's a hybrid. So we have some new construction, some renovation. Branch was a completely new school. So the location where it was at was an old, very dilapidated junior high. And the junior high just was beyond repair. It had reached the point where we had just problems that could not be solved in a costly manner or in a cost efficient manner. And then William A. Bailey, which is an elementary, and that was also a hybrid. So some new construction and then some renovation. All the facilities were constructed in the 50s and 60s. They had swamp coolers or evaporative coolers, which for anyone that's ever gone into a 6th grade classroom in August with a swamp cooler, you'll understand why it's not a good thing to have out here in the desert. They were very far from code. Again, 50s and 60s code, just in general, was just very far from what's expected today when it comes to efficiency, safety. We had hazardous materials because, again, 50s and 60s, things like asbestos and lead paint were commonly used. They'd been made safe, they'd been abated, or they'd been contained and encapsulated. But those materials were still there. And one part of this project, or these projects, was really ensuring that all the hazardous materials were actually abated and removed completely. So moving forward, we'll never have to worry. But can we drill into this wall to do a modification? Can we knock this thing out and not have to ever worry that we're going to run into asbestos or lead paint?
We also had some very unique challenges that were very helpful in the PSMI program as people would come out and evaluate our schools. One example is we had a series of classrooms at Desert Junior Senior High School where there was a giant crack that was running down the length of all the classrooms. So we had foundation failures happening. That evaluation team came and they ranked all of the schools in either green for good, yellow as a concern, or red as failure. And they looked at capacity and facilities. Desert Junior Senior High School qualified in red. So it was failing in all categories that they were looking at. We had ADA minimal compliant issues. Code changes over time. And at the time those schools were built, the code was significantly different. So we needed to address ADA. Also, as the school grew over the years with fields and other auxiliary buildings, we needed to ensure that path of travel was provided moving forward. And the last big thing really was that fire life and safety for us. We had comm systems, we had fire alarm systems, but they were very outdated and they required a lot of work to band-aid them and keep them operational.
For example, when it rained, the phone stopped working because all the conduit was bad. The coding on the wires were bad. So we don't get a lot of rain, but the few rain days we do have, the phone system would stop working. You couldn't call classrooms. So Edwards Air Force Base adds some unique challenges. So one of the biggest things is federal property is not taxed. That's interesting for two reasons. The first is because it doesn't generate any property tax. Schools, which throughout the U.S. are generally funded, at least partially in property tax, we don't receive any funding there. The other complication is because it is not a taxable area, there's no bonding capacity provided by federal land. You can't issue a bond against federal property. So what it means is the schools on the installation, there's no normal way to get funding to do construction. And that's part of why the PSMI program ended up coming to fruition was many districts struggle with that, where because it's inside the installation, the only people that can pay for a bond are the people that generally cannot use those facilities. And most people don't like to pay for something they're not allowed to use. The other challenge with Edwards is just because of the nature of the demographics there, in California, where unduplicated pupils generate additional revenue, we don't have a large unduplicated pupil population there. The communities of Boron, North Edwards, and Desert Lake, what's unique there is while home values are generally lower, and there is a large mine, it's Rio Tinto, it's the US Borax mine. And because that one mine ends up being about 80 to 90% of the assessed value, it is very volatile. So even as we move forward with two bonds, it makes it very difficult because 1 year the assessed value can be very high, and the next year it can be assessed much lower, and we lose bonding capacity year to year. And again, because of that, we don't have enough bonding capacity to do the work in Boron and for the base schools. So that's where the PSMI program came in. And as a whole, because of how LCF funding works, we actually do not match or mirror our neighbors when it comes to demographics. We're a very low free and reduced population, low unduplicated pupils. So we actually receive significantly less funding than surrounding districts. So with stat that helps kind of give the scale. So our yearly budget, we get about 18 million in LCF funding. If we had the same demographics as our neighbors, we'd receive about 4 to 5 million more. So a very significant amount of money. So that other districts have a lot more options of using general fund money as a way to do facility work as well. And we simply don't, because we just don't receive that amount of funding. So for the PSMI program, the general purpose of the program came about is that as folks were traveling throughout the US and they were touring bases, they always tour the schools. Now, it depends on the installation. The schools are inside the installation. It's not very common. So there's a handful like that. Most of the rest, they're adjacent. They're just outside the gate, or they're very close or in a nearby community. And as basically the military brass were traveling throughout the US, one of the things that came up is the question of why so many military schools were dilapidated. They just didn't match even surrounding schools, sometimes in the same districts, and they asked why. And in every different state, it's a little different, but as a whole, it was the same issue where just because they're on the military installation, they just normally don't fall into the programs that are normally available for schools. And so this program came about, ended up being part of the National Defense Authorization Act, and they started building money. The way the program has worked, there's been a number of funding rounds. So the review teams came out, they ranked all the schools based on need. And for us, we were red because one thing they do is they don't count a portable. So a portable is not a classroom to them. So even if you have plenty of room, even if you have 10 extra classrooms that are empty, but they're portables, none of those classrooms would count. And so it meant our capacity was very low. And then the general facility condition was very old. Big thing with the program is a local match and a hard requirement of 20%. We'd pushed very hard at the beginning while we were trying to figure out how to get the match. A lot of other states, the match process was pretty simple. California, it tends to be a little bit different, a little bit harder sometimes. So we had to really look and work and partner to secure our match. the way we did that and we were able to take our match forward, we ended up doing a TK-12 concept where most districts, each school was just its own standalone project. And for us, we had a comprehensive campus. And what that comprehensive campus allowed us to do is it allowed us to utilize match from earlier phases where we were overmatched and pull them through the entire project. So by the time we got to desert, which was our final phase, we were actually using the match from the earlier phases of the elementary as a way to make sure we met that 20% requirement. The way we were able to get to the match was pretty abnormal. So in California, there's the programs, but the dollar values are, the smaller programs. So they're very helpful, but for the scope and scale of our projects, you saw kind of what we're looking at in the video. We had to find more match. We were able to get creative. We had performed a life cycle cost benefit analysis of one of our old campuses to verify the campus wasn't valuable. The other campus, which was Bailey, that one, while it still needed a lot of work, it was worth renovating. So over a comprehensive renovation would create a 50-year school, which is what OEA at the time, now OLDCC, and our district really look for. Is when you look at schools generally, you need to build a building that's going to last 50 years because there isn't a lot of money to renovate. So when you do it, you're going to make sure that you get a building that's going to last. What we did is we were able to appraise that campus and we appraised the property. So one very unique thing, and it's, I believe, unique to our district, whereas most schools inside military installations are on leased property, back, and I forget now, I think it was in the 50s, the United States Air Force actually quit claimed the property to the school district. So we actually have a small patch of state property inside a federal installation. So it's just a little island of state property. Because of that unique scenario, we were able to then take the value, an appraised value of the school that we were going to renovate and the property, and we were able to apply that to the project as in-kind match. It got us pretty far. It got us about 18.6 million, I believe. But we still had to figure out the rest of the match. And that's where we were able to partner with OPSC, go through, touch as many programs as we could. Between those and the Prop 39 energy efficiency funding, we were able to get enough match. We were able to do the projects and do the projects right. So we built 50-year schools for sure that are, they're beautiful schools, and they're schools that are going to last a long time. And they're schools that are going to help showcase Edwards Air Force Base as well, which is one of the goals of this program, was to really just improve the feeling, the morale of the installations that these projects were being done on. It was interesting. So when we started, we actually started construction before we had it secured all the match through OPSC. We started utilizing the schools. So we were truly building the car as we were driving down the road. And it wasn't, we were pretty much starting phase 2 right as we'd finished securing all the match. We used a few funding sources through OPSC. So as part of it, we have one facility hardship project. We had 3 seismic mitigation projects, 1 modernization, and it was a 50-year facility. It's an add-on. The OPSC folks could tell you, I don't remember what the add-on was called. We did 2 CTE new construction grants. 5 of these qualified for financial hardship. We had 2 sites where we utilized Proposition 39 energy efficiency funds. And then, as we talked about, the matching the in-kind from the existing property and facilities. So we really built a lot of pieces to get the match, but without all the folks throughout the state, OPSC, DSA, and CDE, they just wouldn't have happened. It took a lot of people working together to really get all the pieces together, all the approvals needed to get all of these to move forward. Talk on the collaborations.
Yeah. So what we discovered through this process was collaboration was the key to our success. There was no way that we were going to be able to pay for the match on our own. We were going to need to partner with others. And we obviously needed to partner with several folks just to be able to build the buildings. So we hired a new architectural firm We hired our very first construction management team. That was the first that the district has had to do that in a long time. We worked with the Division of State Architects. And one thing that we found throughout this project is anytime that you can meet with someone in person, you get a lot further than just through email or even teleconferencing. Now, our experience has changed because of the pandemic, and teleconferencing is much more normalized now than it was when we first started the project. Nevertheless, we found going around the state, meeting with key people face to face, inviting others to come and see the project and see what the needs were, really helped to build a cohesive team where everyone saw the vision and what could happen. And our greatest partner throughout this, in my opinion, was OPSC. They wound up being the division, the people that had the funding programs for us, the sources. Great partnership with them. The California Department of Education, obviously we work very closely with CDE throughout this entire process. Our facilities director, financial director, we worked with some folks we also worked with those that from the federal team throughout the project. And we were very fortunate to have the same project manager on the federal side for the majority of our project. Mm-hmm. Other people to consider if you want to succeed, you need to have a guy like me. Yeah, you need to have a superintendent that actually has a vision for this and wants to work through it. You need to have someone like Trevor, who can make sure that the vision can be carried out. Legislators, our community leaders, our school board, bringing in parents and students. So we try to incorporate as many people as we could at the beginning of the project to hear about what are the needs. What are the perceived needs from students, perceived needs from parents? They are the end product. The students are the most important piece in all of this. And so we worked with student groups to give us some input on how they would like to see the schools designed as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, we're a small district, so it's relatively easy for us to talk. With our cabinet meetings are very casual. We are honest with one another. I think for bigger districts, they do tend to be more siloed. So it's really important that every group in that district is on the same page and you move forward with construction and funding. We had hiccups even with us and some of our community partners where somebody can say the wrong thing and you have to go and solve that and fix that, where they cause confusion, or another agency can think something different of a project which isn't correct. And it's not intentional, it's not malicious, it's just somebody that didn't quite have the same message, meant very well, but it can definitely kind of throw a wrench in the process as you're going along. So it's very important to just have everyone on the same page, and very much to meeting in person. One thing we found, you can tell someone something, you can show them pictures, you can show them videos, but that is 10% as effective as having somebody just walk through a campus. And that was really where so many groups would say, oh, I think I understand. And once you walk a site, you understand. And there's no real way to get better understanding than just showing something. And we really think that I believe that was really part of why we were able to succeed, is we were able to get folks to just come out and work. You can say there's a crack in the classroom on the floor, but when somebody walks over it and feels that the foundation is heaving, it has a much different impact. And so again, it's just very important to have all those people on the same page. And again, just show them as much in person and in real life as you can, because nothing can beat that.
We also found that it's critical to listen to the professionals, listen to the state agencies that know what their business is. I'll be honest, when we first started off on our projects, we heard from other school districts, other individuals who had been through school construction. They kind of made OPSC sound like a barrier to building schools. And we found that to be absolutely untrue. In fact, 1000% the opposite. We would have some ideas about how we felt we might be able to fund our match. OPSC just explained to us how we could do it. They knew what the path was. And rather than trying to follow our own course, we partnered with them and we listened and we found a way forward. They are very easy to work with, and there are multiple funding streams that are available depending on situations, scenarios, and what the requirements are for the district and in law.
So in funding, obviously there were a lot of funding sources. The at the time OEA, now OLDCC grant process for PSMI is a very intense process. So what some things we found, it is critical to start mapping out your timelines, when you need to apply for grants, when are going to be the meetings, and what do you have to do in preparation. So before you go before the state Board of Allocation, there's going to be a lot of steps, and it's going to involve CDE, it's going to involve DSA. For example, programs like seismic or facility hardship, you have to have other entities signing off on that. So if you try and go too quickly, you're going to miss those critical steps and critical paths. You really have to build those relationships early on. I think before you even start moving forward, it's good to start reaching out and having the conversations about here's what we're trying to do. Again, as Kevin mentioned with OPSC, it's much easier to say, here's what we're trying to do, and have the people who are the experts say, here's the stuff that might fit. Here's a program that makes sense for that. And same with any entity, going to DSA and asking the question, how do we say this facility needs to be retrofitted? How do we, because you can go out and have somebody come out, sign off on it and bring it to DSA, and they'll say, oh, we don't take that one. And you've spent that time and money that you can't get back. Really just maintaining that collaboration. I don't think we can really stress that enough, is you just have to have everyone on board at every step and have the conversations, and just make sure that you're saying out loud what you're doing. At least for me, I have a lot of conversations in my head. So sometimes it's easy to forget that I haven't actually told anyone what's going on. So it's important, again, to say that out loud. That way everyone's on the same page at every step. We found it's important to work with our auditors. As part of OPSC funding, our auditors are going to be the ones in the end that come in. Our independent auditors are the ones that come in and do that audit to make sure that we know that what they're going to expect, how they're going to audit the process. So as we go forward, our paperwork, our documentation matches what's expected of the auditors. So at the end of the project, we hand them the packet, they can review, and we're good to move forward. Same with county, having our County Office of Education here in Kern County on board, just so they understand what's going on. Most districts our size don't issue, checks and worth $3 to $5 million in a month. So it's good to warn them that things are changing, big construction projects. Same with DSA, really having those conversations early on that we found to be very, very helpful to have those conversations, so that we knew what we were looking to do to bring to DSA, so they could sign off on the different projects, as well as just general approvals, what they expect and how they're expecting to move forward. One thing we learned, so in the accounting world, when it comes to funds, we had money in Fund 40, and we learned a painful lesson. It was about $1 million lesson. We had it assigned, and so any business people in the room will understand this. It was assigned, but there had not been a board action on it. So because of that, it was counted as money that was available. And so we actually lost some state funding for it. Thankfully, we had enough projects that we were able to still get our match funding, but we did end up losing $1 million because our board had it assigned, but the board had not taken action to designate it. And it was actually that Fund 40 was our reserve for the bond projects. So it actually was not to be used for the federal projects. That had been kind of part of our board, and a big part of how we were able to actually get the bond campaign to be successful was ensuring that those local monies didn't go to this federal project. Once the project's funded, I cannot stress enough, and we've learned many painful lessons of having to go back and update it. Figure out what's going to be required on the reports at the start. That way, as you move forward, you're tracking it. OPSC has reporting requirements. For us, the PSMI project had very serious and significant reporting. So make sure you're tracking all the things you have to track in a way that makes sense for those reports. So you can just grab that data. So as we got into the first round of OPSC reports, we were tracking everything for the federal reporting. And we're like, oh, this doesn't match what we have to report. We have to go through and kind of rebuild the reports. Because what we were doing, for us, the PSMI reporting is very frequent. It's quarterly. OPSC reporting is a little bit slower. So we'd gotten through a few rounds of the federal reporting. We thought we had it down, and then got the OPSC report. And again, we had to just rebuild the whole thing. And it's one of those things, we looked at it at the start, but just didn't think I should be tracking it this different way as well. Once we did it, it was great. And for all the future reporting, it was fine. But yeah, definitely look at all your reporting requirements. That way, you know what to track, and it saves you a lot of time and a lot of paperwork later on, a lot of Excel time. Maintaining communication, we talked throughout the process with OPSC and the other agencies as we're moving forward. Other thing that's really critical is making sure you have your timing down. So for a lot of these projects, for us, the PSMI program is actually a reimbursement program, so we have to spend the money first. At the start of the project, where our funding was buildings as match, you can't pay bills with buildings. So we had to loan money into those funds to get the project going. And then down the road, as the OPSC projects became funded, which even once they're approved, it still takes a while to actually receive funding. That funding then was the money that allowed us to keep moving forward. And especially as we got into the main construction, we literally were sometimes putting out $7-8 million in a month. And for a district our size, we normally don't have cash like that on hand. So you really want to make sure you do some cash flow analysis. That way, down the road, you're going to be able to make vendor payments and contractor payments, because even there were a few times where we were tight, and contractors get very grumpy on like the 45th day if they haven't gotten a check. Some of them literally that check goes straight to their folks, their contractors. They don't have the cash on hand either. So it's very important to maintain that relationship with your contractors by making sure you're paying them as fast as you can. Like I said, like a net 15 if you can. It makes contractors so much more willing to do things and do things cheaper for you.
So as we began our project, we wanted to ensure that we incorporated as many green and sustainable components as we could. But we also needed to see that we had to cut through the hype. There is a lot of communication around green and sustainable materials and thought processes. And we had to figure out what would work for us and what truly would be considered green and sustainable. Our projects through the PSMI program needed to be LEED Silver equivalent certified. Efficiency and green can be expensive initially, and sometimes it's through the maintenance of it as well, but it is worth it where you can incorporate it. Honest conversations to identify where green and sustainable materials or practices make sense. You might be approached by a number of individuals who want to incorporate the term green or the term sustainable into whatever it is that they sell or their part of construction. It's not always the case that it's necessarily green. So specifically for our project, one thing that worked really well for us was to use shared use facilities. We have a performing arts center, we have a library, we have some fields, but we found as many opportunities as we could to use some shared facilities between the schools, and that's why we located them as closely together as we could. One that's unique that we didn't think of early on, but has paid off a lot in this area, is we have students at the elementary school who during the day need a field to play on. But after school, when no one is there to use that particular field. So we moved practice fields for the high school and some game fields, soccer, softball, onto the elementary campuses. So now during the daytime, younger students use it. And in the afternoon, when they've been released and they're at home, high school students come in and are able to utilize it. That allowed us to cut down on the amount of water that we needed, on electrical, and just ensuring that we maximized and used the space that we had in the most efficient manner possible. We used durable materials everywhere that we could. And we used a lot of native DG, or as we call it, dirt. So leaving the land native where it can be left native and where it makes sense. We placed bathrooms inside buildings with hallways as much as we possibly could. Because of our construction, there were some bathrooms that we reutilized that had exterior doors, but any new restrooms that we built, we ensured that we put them inside. We balancing that grass and the dirt. Again, for us, it has to do with heat and dust. We have a lot of wind where we are, and a lot of sand and a lot of dirt. So where it makes sense, upwind, for example, to try to have more grass areas so that the dirt isn't just blowing through your campus, but leaving the land more native in areas where we could.
So one of the other things we did, it's not necessarily required through a lot of state programs, but because we did have to have that LEED Silver equivalent, we had to have commissioning. It was paid for through the PSMI grant. I believe not all state grants fund commissioning, but it's basically the folks that come through and verify a lot of your systems are going to be operational. So, for example, there's light harvesting and all the lights, even though all the lights are LEDs, they still light harvest and determine how bright they need to be. The HVAC and load balancing and how much the economizers are going to bring fresh air in, all those go through a commissioning process, and they come out, they evaluate them, they verify all these systems work properly, and you get a report back showing that here's these products that were installed and they are functioning appropriately and properly. Other things we added, we have managed thermostats through a central management system for all the HVAC. It allows us to go and see which classrooms are using the most heat. You can go through and say, it's kind of weird that this one classroom in a hallway is using more power, more energy than any other one. And you can go find out that it's because that teacher's leaving the door open. It allows a lot of, allows data to see perhaps there's an issue, but also allows just, after hours, you can bump your temperatures up. You don't need to, heat a building to a comfortable temperature when it's not in use. So for example, over Christmas break, you still need heat because you don't want your building to degrade or pipes to freeze, but it doesn't need to be heated the same way. And so it allows just a lot easier management of that. The old school, the old mercury thermometers, it's kind of hard to go through and, 2 clicks have all that work. We also have a lot of water capturing through our sites. We are actually, a lot of water flows through the site we're at. And so the site has, I think it's something like 30 feet, 50 feet of elevation across the sites. And so the water would flow through. So we actually have retention basins, and some of the fields actually are retention basins. That way, if we do have heavy rain, which we actually had, of course, in the last couple of years, we've had some major rainstorms out here. And we're very happy to have all these ways to capture the water. A, so that it's captured and just goes back in the ground, but B, it also means the buildings don't flood, which is, a nice plus.
Yeah, prior to construction at Bailey Elementary School, anytime that it rained heavily, we had a bank of classrooms where the water would flow in through one door, across the classroom, and out the other side, and we'd have to sandbag the school up. So yeah, having these water retention areas, critical for us.
We also added dishwashing stations in all the kitchens we've renovated. And it looks like that the state is walking that way more and more. I think one of the things we even proposed in the most recent state budget is grants for dishwashers. So we'll say we were ahead of the curve on that one. We did see that was a likely future outcome to have the need for dishwashing for silverware and plateware. So we added dishwashing stations. We also looked at concrete, where concrete does add thermal load. However, concrete doesn't require a lot. It doesn't require mowing, doesn't require water, doesn't require chemicals. Even if you're doing real DG and you're bringing it in, it's going to require tractors to weed it, or it's going to require Roundup or other chemicals to keep it clean. Where we did add vegetation is drought tolerant. We have bubblers or drip sprinklers in those areas. And we have LEDs pretty much everywhere. There are some places where LEDs don't work great. For example, in a performing arts building, if you have dimmable lights, LEDs have a minimum power requirement. So we actually had a few places where LEDs didn't make sense, but overall, everything's LED now. We did find some hurdles. A lot of the green sustainable pathways are expensive. They're usually not the cheapest way to go. And you really have to look and say, what's the return on investment for some of these? And some, if it's an 80-year return on investment, that's a harder one. Or if it's a 5-year or 10-year return on investment, that makes sense. It's something you're going to see in the life of the facility. A lot of these aren't funded, so you're really having to try and incorporate them into the funding streams that already exist. We had some unique ones, but it can be an issue in some cities with reflectivity. Going to like a pure white roof or solar panels, they are reflective. For us on an Air Force base, it has an enhanced problem of reflectivity because they fly around and don't want their pilots blinded. We talked already, but we do see some of these pieces of equipment have increased maintenance. There's controllers, there's electronic systems, there's solenoids, there's so many more points of failure. So they do require a lot more constant maintenance. Things like light harvesting, the computer can get fried and the lights don't increase in brightness, or they are all super bright, and LEDs can be really bright, and they're blinding out your kids in the middle of the day because the lights have gone 100% because the system had a hiccup. So it does add a lot more need for just maintenance, and really skilled maintenance. An old fluorescent tube you would rewire. Now you have to be able to sit down with a laptop and understand why the lights aren't doing what you want. One thing we have found too, low VOC, very green, understand the reasons. It is not nearly as durable. The paints don't hold up as well. Floor tiles don't stay down. For example, we had an issue where we did a floor. Somebody who was new to the district and had never mopped a new floor before poured water on the floor and ruined it because the new glues are water soluble. So if you flood a VCT floor and you don't get that water up right away, then the floor, the glue lets go, the tiles curl, and it's ruined. Also, reclaimed water. So for these schools, the base has its own water processing, but it actually didn't have enough reclaimed water. So we did not run reclaimed water through our schools because we could have added all that piping, but the reality is there's not enough reclaimed water generated in the area for us to have it. We also found, and I always think back to King of the Hill, people might get this, low flow fixtures are good, but they're not always good. And you have to really make sure you're getting the right equipment. So things like toilets and other facilities like that, or even some of the fixtures on faucets, at a certain point, you have to make sure the low flow is done right. You have the right aerators. Otherwise, what you find is people just end up using it a lot more. If you have to flush the toilet 3 times, you probably didn't save any water. So you really need to make sure you're getting the right fixtures. Don't cheap out on something that just meets the compliance. Make sure it's actually a good fixture. We learned a lesson a few places there where we got something because this one's twice the price. I don't understand why. Then once you install it and use it, and you go, oh, I understand why it's twice the price now.
And I would say be prepared to make adjustments to your normal practices. As you go green and sustainable, there are going to be times, as Trevor mentioned, it isn't as easy to necessarily go in and change the ballast out on a light any longer. It now might require teaching your employees how to use a laptop and how to fix things and how to do things differently. You may need to change up your cleaning schedules with your custodians. If low flow toilets require more cleaning, you're going to have to kind of factor that in. I would say, in our opinion, it's worth it where it fits best for you in your circumstances. So some lessons that we learned through all of this, we'll share our thoughts on this. Architects are artists. They do not like a straight line. I love them. I love all architects. So any architects watching this, not an insult. But there is never a rectangular shaped building that's going to work. I think most of the things we built had odd angles. They look great, but definitely no straight line. Mm-hmm. Wind loading. At least for us, we've learned that we needed to be more prepared for the wind loading on our doors. So we're going back now at the tail end of the project, and we're adding in some screen walls and some other mitigation factors to keep the wind from tearing up and destroying our brand new schools. How about function over form? Trevor, what did you say about that?
I mean, angles are a big one. We actually had one building on one of our campuses that we had 3 meetings about how to handle the corner, because the framers, the plasterers, none of the equipment they had worked at this angle. So you really have to, like, you want your campuses to be pretty. You want them to be aesthetically pleasing. You want them to be dramatic. You want that community satisfaction of look at our schools. But you make sure you really look at what are you using it for. Another great example we have some custodial closets that don't fit our custodial cart. And it's just an oversight, but nobody went and measured one of our custodial carts and said, we need to make sure this specific cart fits in this specific building and this specific room. And, we were able to find new carts that fit in these spaces, but there's those little things where you just figure out what you're using it for, and then make sure you're really driving, the function is driving in design, not just the aesthetics. We also added noise dampening. So a lot of our, and these were after the fact, people like the open architectural spaces, the exposed conduit and ducting. It looks very pretty, very industrial, very on point for design right now. It's loud. And when you have eight small kids in there having a conversation, nobody can hear anything anymore. So you really want to make sure you're looking at the noise, and we ended up having to add panels, clouds in the ceiling, noise reduction panels across the rooms. And there were added costs at the, near the end of the project that we weren't planned on.
Be careful to not assume anything. Have very open and direct conversations with everyone on your team to ensure that the right people are tracking the right parts of the project. Take time to go visit other schools. We found that invaluable. We would go out with our architects sometimes, or our construction management team. We would partner with just people that we are colleagues with, and go out and visit their districts and look at specific components that they have that we wanted to incorporate in our project. So we went to one school district, I think 3 times, just to look at their HVAC system, and how they centralized that, and how they had centralized control. Because before we started this project, most of our classrooms had evaporative coolers. And those that had thermostats in there, they were open. Teachers could go in and just adjust them as much as possible. You would go classroom to classroom, and in one you would find the temperature 75, and in the next one 65. That has a large impact on your budget. So being able to control that temperature setting, that was huge. But we didn't understand that nearly as well as we did before we went out and visited sites that had those. So again, to Trevor's point earlier, even for yourself, you can be told about it. You can watch videos about it. You can see pictures of it. But going out and physically seeing what others are doing, it's not just inspirational, but you really can catch a vision of what is possible for you.
And then LEED, we already talked a little bit. LEED certification, it's expensive. We asked the questions and learned, like, getting that actual certification has a cost to it, and it's cool and it's nice, but for us, it doesn't help the students. So for our district, we never move forward with it because we would rather put it into a facility, get better furniture, or have a flexible space instead of a static space. Some of the lessons we learned, and I'll start and let Kevin finish this one. So I talked again, understanding this reporting process is important. I put it in here twice intentionally because figure out your reporting and then make sure you track everything to match your reporting, and that saves so much time. And I wish I'd thought of that and planned it better. So hopefully it helps somebody here to do that now, and then by the end of the project, you'll be really happy about all the time you saved.
By the time you build what you've designed, much will have changed. This was extremely true for us as we started our project pre-pandemic. Classrooms and school spaces and just campuses in general, they look a little different now in a post-pandemic world, or can. And that wasn't the only area that we saw change in. No matter what you design today, By the time you get to actually constructing it, you're going to want to double check that your initial idea is still on point. As you're going through the process, you need to make adjustments as early as possible so that you don't delay construction when the time comes to actually put in place what you originally designed. Pay attention to all those details. I'll give you one example for us. At Desert Junior Senior High School, first day of school for the teachers, we're all excited. Students are there, teachers are there, and word starts to trickle in that some teachers are not as happy with their classrooms as we thought they would be, and definitely had hoped they would be. We didn't put cabinetry in their classrooms. We all thought that somebody else had that part covered, and they wound up 80% of our classrooms there just did not have cabinets, especially the areas that we renovated. We removed the cabinets. They didn't have very much to begin with. We removed those, we renovated the classroom, but forgot to put new cabinetry in. So our teachers came back to the brand new school, walked into their classrooms and said, I wish I had my old busted up cabinets. So we pivoted quickly. We were able to put those in for them, but we learned a very valuable lesson to make sure that we're paying attention to all of the details, especially the things that you think, well, of course.
One thing we also found, so there's codes, and the codes get more intense as we move forward. But codes don't always cover safety, and you have to sometimes take a step back and say, is this safe? So one thing it's a large V gutter. I think it's about an 18-inch deep gutter, and it's just a V. It was right next to our front sidewalk, and it was at our elementary. And so we watched as kids would play through the gutter every day, or see people wandering and walking, and they're on their phone and they step in the gutter. So we ended up having to come back, and we added, I think it was about 300 feet of guardrail. So people couldn't wander into the gutter. It passed code. There was nothing wrong with it code-wise, but from a logic standpoint, it was a big oversight. Another thing we learned, we didn't yet, before this project, I couldn't talk about intersection types. However, offset T intersections are bad. Don't use them if you can avoid them. We ended up with an offset T intersection at a street, and not that traffic at schools is ever good, but this type of intersection makes it even worse than possible. And one thing we can say, having gone through the pandemic, we spent, all school districts, I think, spend years trying to understand how to make traffic better. As far as we can tell, the pandemic was the only time we had traffic solved, when everyone was home. The rest of the time, traffic always seems to be an issue. So if you ever solve it, let us know. We've had so many folks from so many districts. We went out, we talked to people, and everyone we spoke to is like, if you figure out how to make traffic work, let us know. So everyone's trying, but that's one of those things that I think is just an unsolvable problem.
Just remember also, most agencies, they really do want to help you. Although there are requirements that may not make it as simple or as quick as you want it to be, it doesn't mean that they don't want to help. It's just there is a process, and there are processes in place for reasons. Explain what you want to do and what the hurdles are to everyone in the room. Don't leave anyone out. We brought up topics to DSA, to the director of DSA, that had nothing really to do with his wheelhouse, but we wanted to kind of pick his brain on a few things. We would talk to our architects about things that weren't in their wheelhouse. The more people that you can involve, and not just get married to your own greatest idea. I think most of my great ideas were thrown out, or were changed, were adapted by other people. I don't know that any singular individual had their own idea go from start to fruition without somebody coming in and putting their flavor into it as well. A real team effort. Elected officials and their staffs are very powerful allies if needed. Our circumstance was very unique in that we had a large federal program, and the majority of the money was coming from the Department of Defense. So we leveraged Congress. We leveraged a lot of government agencies to help us in securing our funding. Modernization needs significant Trevor, why don't you take that one?
No, sure. we found modernizations, you really need to have big contingencies set aside. You really don't know what's in a building until you open it up. For us, we had some buildings where once we pulled the drywall off, the plans we had in the building were not the same. Whether they're modified over time, we don't know. But once you open the building up, that's when you start to figure out what your true costs. So new construction, you can keep your contingencies lower. Those are a lot easier to manage. But when you're doing modernization, you have no clue. For us, one of the things we kept finding asbestos wrapped pipes or transite pipes. We had both on our campus, and we didn't know they were there until we're doing grading, and we'd find this pipe. They go asbestos. Everyone thinks stops. They have to go. They abate. I think truly at our project it was something like $50,000 to $80,000 in just surprise pipe abatement, and that's just one small category. Also, having priority lists is really helpful. We've needed this, kind of in the video. If you saw, we went through a trade war. We ended up for our boron projects, we ended up cutting about a third of the project. We already knew kind of had a priority list going into it, so it made it easier, not less painless or not less painful, but at least we had a plan already in advance. So having some priorities, do you need this? Do you need that? Or perhaps we really want this product, but we can go to this product if we have to.
And I think we've all seen with supply chain in the last few years that global markets and global circumstances, things that are happening way outside of your school district, outside of our country, can have a significant impact on your project as well.
And then last, for us, it's been very helpful. We did hire in a construction management company. We use their name CPM. I truly don't think we could have gotten as far as we have without having them. Again, so an expert in a field is an expert in a field, and for us, we work in schools, and even if you know home construction, school and government construction is just a very different game. And when we started, I think we would hear numbers and just look at them and say that number seems insane. It shouldn't cost this much money to do that. Having a construction management firm who has been doing it, they understand what it should cost, they understand what it should take. For example, if you have some change orders are going to be on like time and material. It's really good having someone to track that and say this should take this long, and be out there and see a worker and say, hey, step it up. I know you're dragging your feet. If you don't know those things, you don't know those things, and it's something you learn by doing. So having those people out there in the field to really be on the contractors, make sure things are being good. Sort of the same idea as door locks. It's one of those, you just got to keep the honest people honest sometimes. And having someone with that expertise out there helps immensely. Couple things we wish we had the funding to do, or things, going back if we had. Solar and batteries become a lot more attainable now. When we were starting these projects, they weren't really a huge thing. To give you an idea, when we first started these projects, we were being told, I had a conversation about LEDs because I like LEDs, and they were talking about how LEDs weren't quite ready for prime time. And now, by the time we started and we bid the projects, everything was an LED. So, these do move quickly. For watering, one of the things we found, you want to water generally at least here in the desert and hot environments, nighttime, evening. We ended up where we just don't quite have enough capacity. So we do end up having to do some watering in less than ideal hours because we just don't have enough capacity. We have the pressure differentials in buildings are created by wind. So we have very efficient buildings. The envelopes are very tight. But what happens is you open one door and it can actually open another door. So a door of panic hardware where it's ganged open will open, and then all the hot or cold air blows out from the other end of the hallway because the wind pushes through that building. So designing different doorways or ways to mitigate some of those pressure differentials would have been great.
You want to make sure that the equipment that you order actually, the specifications actually meet your needs. Mm-hmm. So for one of our CTE programs, we needed an air compressor. What we ordered and what we installed worked for the program as it was when we designed it. But when that program stood up and students could enroll in it, the capacity was much larger, or the enrollment was much larger than we anticipated, and our compressor no longer met the needs for the students. And so we had to replace that compressor and find another use for the original one that we put in place. And it wasn't just a little compressor you go down to Home Depot and buy and install in your garage. These are pieces of equipment that are of significant value and cost.
And the last, more capacity for EV chargers, for electric vehicle chargers. We've seen in the last few years a huge surge, not just for personal vehicles, but also for business vehicles. So even just bringing out the conduits and building in the circuits to put it in the future would have been helpful, because we have a few spots where having an EV charger now would be great, but the build out would have been a lot less during the project, and now that build out is going to be a lot more money because we're done with construction, and then we're going to be we're going to have to go through and cut asphalt and things of that nature. So putting those things in for future proof can be real helpful, and we wish we'd done more of that at the time. Just had that out there so that down the road, if we wanted to install EV chargers, we already had that infrastructure built in as part of the project. With that, really just make sure you look at what's sustainable, what's green, and really make sure that they're fit for you and for your district. Getting funding is a big project, as a big process. It takes time, it takes energy. So you have to be patient, and you just have to plan, build those timelines in. Really, you need to balance your upfront construction costs with long-term upkeep. And for us, we would bias very much to trying to minimize upkeep. So if some surface might be more expensive upfront, but the maintenance or the life of it was longer, we generally would try and pick that product. A great example is our roofs. We went with TPO roofs. They're not necessarily the prettiest roofs, but they're very durable, and they're very easy to maintain. So there's something we don't have to worry about.
The last things that we would say for final thoughts: build a team before you need it. You don't want to be in a crisis and then try to go out and find people to help you through it. Have your team established so that when the crises pop up, and they will, you will have a team there that's ready to meet the demand. Meet early and meet often with agencies and stakeholders. I know we've talked about this quite a bit today, but we cannot overemphasize how important it is to sit as much as you can, knee to knee, face to face, and be able to talk about your needs and what they can help you to meet those needs. Have fun. By all means, you got to remember that this is something that should be a fun opportunity and experience for everyone. There's going to be some highs and some lows, but overall, this should be an exciting adventure, because you have the opportunity to provide schools for the next generations in your school district. What a great opportunity to have. And remember that at the end of it all, just to keep the focus on kids. As you go through construction, as you look at green and sustainable products that you might want to put in, we need to make sure that we overemphasize how it meets the needs of the student. And as long as we can do that, then we know that we've done the very best that we can do for those that we are here to serve. And that's the students that attend school now and those that will attend in the future. We want to express our appreciation to OPSC, to Lisa specifically, to Brian. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your guidance through our project. We would not have been able to complete these projects without the Office of Public School Construction. They weren't the only entity, so I know Lisa would probably say, don't make it sound like we were the only ones. They weren't, but they were the key to our project, and they most likely will be the key to yours as well. We would encourage you to work collaboratively and happily together, and we can do great things for kids moving forward. Thank you very much.
So we talk a lot about funding and how we utilize OPSC funding. And the great part about having them with us is now they can go and cover some of the funding sources, and much more eloquently than we can, as we've stumbled through these processes, talk about the processes. So we'll hand it over to Brian to go through these funding sources.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm sitting here just blown away by the scope and the magnitude of the projects that you accomplished out there. And oftentimes I don't get to hear a lot of the details of what happens at the local level, and I find it just amazing and just so intriguing, all the different things that you guys have to go through, and that you were able to pull it together so successfully. Once again, I'm Brian Lepask. I'm Chief of Program Services at OPSC. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about mostly our facility hardship program and the seismic program that goes along kind of as a subset of that. It's a program that's very near and dear to me. I've worked in the facility hardship realm most of my career at OPSC. I've been here over 20 years. And while I always say that our role in these projects is modest, I understand too that it can be a really great tool for a school district, especially when you consider most of the time when districts access this program, or either one of the programs, either facility hardship or seismic, they have issues that are popping up out of thin air, and they're not prepared for them. They're not expecting them, and it's urgent that they get their main goal is to get the kids back into classroom in a safe and efficient manner. It's a really serious issue, and anything that we can do to help with that and partner with the district to get them to get their kids back in class, get their facilities back in order, is something that I take great passion in. I really enjoy what I do. I'm always proud to tell people what we do. And, just like with Muroc here, we help districts all the time getting their facilities back in order. So just a quick look at what our table of contents is for our portion of this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do, what our role is, what the state allocation board is, and then we're going to go into some of the basics of the facility hardship program, just a brief overview and outline of the program, and kind of how you can incorporate sustainable facilities in the course of doing health and safety mitigation. So on the next slide is our state allocation board members. The composition of the board always remains the same. The individuals change, but the composition is always the same. And basically how it works is the Department of Finance is the chair of the state allocation board. Mr. Steppenshaw is the current Department of Finance director, but Gail Miller is their policy director. And typically the policy director is the one who sits in for the chair. We have the state superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurman. He has a designee, Juan Morales. He's the director of the School Facilities and Transportation Services Division at CDE. Juan's very familiar with our program. He's been on the board for a long time. And then we have Ana Lasso. She's our director at DGS. So whoever the current director at DGS always sits on the board, and then there's always a governor's appointee. Currently, and for the last, as long as I can remember, actually, recently, it's Jeremy Smith right now. Before that, it was another individual that's part of the Building and Construction Trades Council of California. Very important aspect of our program is the building and construction trades. And so that's usually who we'll have on there. Then we have 3 Senate staff and 3 Assembly staff. You can see the current ones there on screen. We have Senators Josh Newman, John Laird, and Scott Wilk. And then we have Assembly members Al Maratsuchi, Laura Davies, and Mia Bontet at the moment. Little history about OPSC. We were originally part of Department of Finance, and not long after that, we moved over to DGS, where we are still. In 1995, our name became the Office of Public School Construction. We had a few little changes in our names prior to that, but we've been the Office of Public School Construction since '95. We are currently authorized for 75 positions. We do have a few vacancies at the moment, but we're a relatively small office. We are a busy office. We are authorized to process 1.5 billion in applications per year. That's a lot of applications. Most of them are, single-digit million applications. Occasionally, we have applications that exceed 10 million, or 30 or 40 even. But typically they're 2, 3 to 5, 7, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we go through a lot of applications every year. We have a very busy staff, a very dedicated staff, and we don't have a lot of turnover, I should say, in our senior management especially. We have a combined over 133 years of experience with our programs and with OPSC. So we have a very seasoned leadership team. We're all very passionate about what we do, and like with this project, we're just so proud to explain to people and you know the programs, and just go out there and partner with people. We really take a lot of pride and enjoyment out of using our experience to benefit schools out there. So looking at just a brief look here at the construction process and what our role is. The process always starts with planning and design, and once those are completed, once your design is complete, you're going to get those approved by the Department of Education and DSA. You can do those processes simultaneously. In fact, we recommend that. A lot of times there'll be things that, I mean, there's always things that DSA will ask you to incorporate into your design. There's also sometimes things that CDE will ask you to incorporate into your design that you may not have planned for. And so we always tell people it's a good idea to do those in parallel, or maybe go to CDE at the latter half of the DSA process, so that if there are changes, you can incorporate those into your plans and you won't alter your schedule at all. So you'll be able to keep moving through and get all the things into that design that are required. Once you have your plan approvals, you can come to OPSC for funding. We do a eligibility and funding review once we get the application. And you know, that's a stepped process. It doesn't have to have it happen at the same time. You can have eligibility established way beforehand and then come in later for funding. So if you're ever wondering of what you're eligible for, just contact us on our website, and I'll give you some details on contacts later. But our website, we have project managers dedicated to each of the counties throughout California. So wherever county you're in, there's a representative in our office that can help you with these things, and they can help you evaluate eligibility, get you straightened out on the forms you need, and kind of give you an overview of what you should expect when you come into our office for either funding or eligibility. Once the applications are processed, you go to the SAB, the State Allocation Board, for an apportionment. Currently, we're doing direct apportionments. In the recent past, we had a two-step apportionment process. We would do what's called an unfunded approval and then an apportionment. But right now, being that we're not using bond funds, we're using budget appropriations, we go straight to the apportionment. We have cash on hand. And so with a project like a health and safety project, if it's a facility hardship or seismic, those projects go immediately to the top of our workload list, and you can typically be processed in 90 to 120 days and get your funds released not long after that. So while it's not quick as emergency funding, such as like FEMA or maybe Cal OES funding, we can get you funding pretty quickly in the grand scheme of things. Once you receive your apportionment, you're going to go out and you're going to start your project. You're going to have DSA oversight during construction. Once you're completed with that, they're going to give you what's called a certification. And that just means that it's Field Act compliant. It was built in accordance with all the requirements that DSA has for building construction and safety. And all throughout that process as well, annually, you'll submit substantial progress and expenditure reports to OPSC. We send out reminders that ask you for those things on an annual basis. It's 1 year from your apportionment, every year after that until the project is complete. And typically, if it's a elementary school, you have 3 years to complete the project from apportionment. If it's a middle or a high school, or if they incorporate those grades, you have 4 years. Once all the expenditures are finalized, the district will hire a local auditor and go through a closeout audit, and that completes the process. So it starts with design, goes all the way through to the audit. OPSC has a role in most of those things, but not all of them. But we can help you with any aspect of it and give you some guidance there. All right, so our overarching program is called the School Facility Program. There's a lot of smaller, bits of the School Facility Program. All of these are within the School Facility Program, but they're all individual, sub-programs. So we have new construction modernization. Those are the main programs that we do, that we have the most activity in. That's just standard new construction and modernization. And then we have facility hardship and seismic mitigation there. I underline them because that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Those are health and safety projects. And so those are projects that are urgent. There's a health and safety issue that's existing, and they go right to the top of our workload. Then we have financial hardship, which really isn't a program, but more of it's an aid to get funding for matching for the other programs there on the list. And I'll go into financial hardship in a little bit, but essentially that's financial assistance for districts that either don't have the resources or don't have enough resources to make the match for a state-funded project. We also have career technical educational facilities. We're currently out of authority for those, but it's been a very popular program over the last 10 or 12 years, or even maybe a little longer than that. And these are facilities that focus on pathways to getting kids educated and getting kind of real world job skills while they're in high school. And it's a really great program. Like I said, it's been very, very popular. And we love that program. I mean, we've seen so many cool facilities. Some down in this district we saw today, and we see them all over the state. And whenever I see those districts, are so proud of them. There's just a lot of really great examples of career tech facilities. And then we have charter school facilities program funding too. Charter schools are growing in popularity in California, and so we have a funding stream for those as well. So let's see. So how do sustainable facilities work into the school facility program? Most of the construction, the costs that are related to building sustainable facilities are eligible. Some of the operational things, such as commissioning, are not. But the components, all the different aspects of building and green technology, I think you can incorporate those into your projects. And I know that some of them may cost a little more, but some of them don't. And we see all the time, even projects that are mitigating health and safety issues, they're able to incorporate green technology or sustainable technology, or build sustainable facilities. We see it all the time. And so I think, as time goes on, it's a lot more commonplace. We're seeing it a lot more often, and we've seen a lot of success in that realm. People have been really turning it up on the sustainable facilities, and so we encourage that. We don't have any grants anymore specifically related to green technology. We have at one time. We had an energy efficiency program a long time ago, and more recently we had the high performance incentive grant program, where if you were exceeding what California Green Code is, you could get extra funding. We don't have any of those funds right now. They are sunset, but we're looking forward to the future, maybe having some more. But again, you can incorporate all those things. The vast majority of the costs associated with sustainable facilities can be done in our program. So facility hardship program. This is kind of what we wanted to focus on today. This is a program that when you have a health and safety need on your campus that is creating an imminent threat, a lot of times we'll see stuff like mold. We'll see, perhaps dry rot that's causing structural issues. There's just a whole bunch of different categories of projects you can see. We've seen so many different ones. There's well projects, districts that can't get water to their campus, all sorts of stuff. And again, these usually pop up out of nowhere. They happen, and the district's not expecting them to. They come out of left field, and it's an imminent risk. You have to maybe vacate your facilities, or you need to mitigate that issue. So that's what this program is for. Also, lately we've seen unfortunately, a lot of wildfires, a lot of floods in the state, and we can help with those things too. This program can help repair the damages or replace facilities that are affected by natural disasters. Oftentimes those those projects will be covered by FEMA or CDAA funding, or some sort of emergency funding, or maybe perhaps insurance. And in those cases, if there's a gap in funding there, OPSC can step in and cover that gap. And so we always like to get in touch with those districts that have those issues that are arising, especially in the last few months here, early part of 2023 and late part of 2022, we've seen a lot of flooding. And so we have numerous meetings set up with districts. We meet every 2 weeks or once a month, and we keep track of how their projects are going and make sure that they understand that we're there to help them if they need it. And just kind of make sure they're aware of what's needed, what steps to take if they need to come to us for funding. That's a lot of what we do, is we partner with districts like that, and we try to make sure that they're aware of what the program can do for them if they need that. Some details about the program. We did make some program amendments in August of 2020. Primarily, it was to reorganize and refocus our regulations. A lot of the program didn't really change. We just wanted to clarify things and make it a little bit more easy to digest. It can be a little bit, it's a little tricky when you've never done one before. But again, that's what we're here for, is to support that. But we wanted our regulations to reflect how simple we think the program really can be. And so that was the extent of what we did. We did tighten up a few things related to ensuring that the funding is going for the most critical projects, which is what the program is for. But we really just refocused the program a little bit and got it a little bit more organized regulation wise. It doesn't touch eligibility for new construction or modernization. So if you have eligibility on the books with OPSC to build new classrooms that you need for expanding capacity, or if you're going to be modernizing facilities for, just normal wear and tear, this program does not affect those. So, if you have a structural issue in a classroom building, for instance, you can get funding from facility hardship to fix your structural issue. And then you can also couple that with modernization funding to upgrade your roofs, maybe put in new lighting, new technology, painting, et cetera, things like that. So they complement each other. They don't replace one another. And then, like I mentioned earlier, these projects are prioritized. So currently, when you submit a new construction or funding application, it goes onto a list and it's funded, but it takes a lot longer than it would for these health and safety projects. Once we receive a complete application, we're typically able to turn that around and present it to the state allocation board for approval in about 90 to 120 days. That's a recognition of the urgency of these types of projects and just how much we focus on them as an office. We understand that you got to get those kids back in the classroom, and so we try to mitigate those health and safety issues as quickly as we can. A subset of the facility hardship program is seismic mitigation, and it works much the same as the facility hardship program does. The difference is that it's obviously, as the name indicates, it's for mitigating seismic issues. Another thing is that the seismic program funds potential issues. These are certain building types that would be susceptible to damage in the event of an earthquake. So you're pre-planning or kind of pre-treating these buildings so that when an earthquake, if and when an earthquake does happen, they're prepared to sustain that. Facility hardship is more for imminent risk, whereas again, seismic is for the potential risk if there's an earthquake. All of these projects are funded on a 50-50 basis. When you have a rehabilitation project under facility hardship, it's funded at 60-40, but a rehabilitation under seismic mitigation is funded at 50-50. The process and criteria have not changed in the program. We did take these as part of our regulation updates, but we didn't change any criteria in this program, so it remains intact. So just kind of wrapping it back into the sustainable aspect of this, even in these health and safety mitigation programs, while they are a minimum work program, oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, every time, when you get these, either the facilities rehabilitated, or if you're building a new facility, you're going to need to meet green code, and you're going to need to, especially if you're doing rehabilitation, you're going to have to do some access compliance upgrades and some other things. There's no reason why you can't incorporate sustainable facilities with the funding you're going to receive. If it's things that you are already required to do as part of your plan approval, those things are covered under our program. And so what these programs cover are, again, the minimum work to mitigate the health and safety issue, and then any sort of work that's being required to do in order to obtain plan approval. Muroc is this shining example of this. They were able to accomplish just a ton of projects out there with so many different details and so many things, and they were able to deliver all that and also deliver sustainable facilities. It can be done. It's just a perfect example of it. And so we thought that, talking about our program and using, thinking about sustainable facilities and showing that it can be accomplished would inspire everyone else to really try to do that in their projects. It's definitely something that we're seeing increase in popularity and in frequency, and I think we'll continue to see that. And so, just wanted to remind everybody that you can do that. Even though it's a minimum work program, you can incorporate those sustainable facilities. Our program will pay for it. Yeah, so there's really no reason not to do it. Okay, so last piece of the puzzle here, the financial hardship process. A lot of districts have these emergency projects or any other project really, and they just don't have the local resources to make the match. And so what can be done in those situations? We have a financial hardship review that can take place. The prerequisites to qualifying for financial hardship, the first one is that you must be levying maximum developer fees. This is a number that changes every 2 years in the even number years. So we have one in 2022. We'll have another update in 2024. And OPSC publishes that number and the SAB approves it typically at the January meeting of those even numbered years. You can look in the SAB agenda and you'll see what's called the construction cost index adjustment. We adjust our grants annually, and then we also adjust the developer fees every 2 years. You must be levying that fee in order to qualify. And then there's a secondary qualification. You have to meet one of the following criteria there on your screen. Long-term debt, 60% or more of your debt capacity, a successful voter bond in the past 2 years. So you're trying to, you're actively going out and getting community involvement, but you just don't have quite enough to cover. All COEs qualify, or you can have a bonded capacity of $5 million or less. Not everybody fits into those boxes. There's also another kind of a catch-all, I guess you could say, criteria is you can go to the state allocation board and kind of explain your situation and see if they will approve you for financial hardship status. This is something that it's kind of almost like we call it the light switch test. If you meet these criteria, you can go into our online database now and see if you meet it. We have people available to walk you through those steps if you'd like, but it is something that's available through our online database in OPSC Online. Recently, we did streamline, pretty recently, about 5-6 years ago, we streamlined the financial hardship process. The way that it works now is like I said, a lot of applications when they come in, especially not health and safety applications, just standard ones, will go onto a list and they're processed and date order received. You just check the box for financial hardship assistance on the form. OPSC will notify you 90 days prior to processing, and that'll kind of give you a heads up of, okay, the processing is going to start. I'm going to start collecting my financial documents, because once processing does start, and again, this is only for new construction and modernization or other programs, the facility hardship and seismic program, you're right out of the gates, you're going to be processing. We're going to process it the day we receive it. We're going to start on it. And so in parallel to that processing timeline, that 90 to 120 days, we're going to request financial hardship documents from you. It's going to be a lot of financial information, and we'll send you a letter and we'll explain exactly what we do need, and we'll work with you on that. We have an entire team that does financial hardship reviews, but you're going to have 60 days to provide that. And so we have some checklists and some resources on our website that will tell you what you could prepare ahead of time. But we're going to need you to prepare those things so we can keep your application on track and get it approved as quickly as possible. And like it says there in the kind of that fourth bullet, is that we do the processing of the funding application and the financial hardship in parallel. So while we're seeing where your qualifications are at program wise, we're looking at where you're at financially as well, and kind of working those in coordination with one another. Okay, so this is a really good, we always put this at the back of our presentations. I highly recommend anybody interested in our program sign up for this subscription list. It doesn't send out a lot of email. It's they're somewhat regular, but maybe 1 or 2 a month, something like that. There's not a whole lot, so it's not going to put a lot of junk in your email box. It's only good information, and there's a lot of really important events that we have. If you're if you're going to be active in our program and you're interested. All of our meeting notifications, announcements about priority funding timelines, any other information about the OPSC and SAB that applies to all districts, we put them there. And it's an easy way without having to go to the website and look at news. You can just get them right to your inbox. And so I always highly recommend people look at that. Now, for the purposes of this recording, we're not going to be taking questions today, obviously. but we are always available to assist you. On the next slide is our contact information. And, anytime you have any information that you need from us or any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to OPSC. We're ready to be partners with you. We highly encourage you to, even if you're not sure or you don't think you might qualify, please contact us and find out for sure. You never know. And we're more than happy to assist you with your projects, just like we did with Muroc. And we look forward to partnering with you when the time comes. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.